Hello, hello, hello. How are you all? Good morning. Um, Good morning, good morning, good morning. So, welcome to the Ashley Nicole Show. I'm super excited about this episode. I cannot wait to chat with you guys about this morning message. I'm going to do this message before getting my day started. It's Friday, and I am looking forward to taking it a little bit easier than usual. So, I'm recording this on a Friday for those of you all listening to this afterwards. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about. So, come on in. Okay, come on in. We're going to be talking today about why fairness is un-American and how you can still win despite this. And the reason I wanted to have this conversation is because in light of everything that's going on, there are a lot of people that feel a little bit more hopeless than usual. There are a lot of business owners that I'm hearing and that are coming to me in my direct messages like, Ashley, I am a bit concerned about what the direction in which this country is going in. I don't really know how to handle this. There are a lot of companies that are reaching out like, how do we best prepare our employees for next week, regardless of which side of the political sphere they fall on. And so I just want to give you guys some encouragement that although fairness and equity, as we know in this country, as I know as a Black woman in this country, as a lot of my viewers and listeners know, is an un-American concept, there is still a way to win in spite of that. And we're going to talk about what that is and what that is specifically for you. So if you're ready, just drop a ready in the comments. If you're watching this live, if you're listening in, just give me a ready wherever you're listening at. And then we're going to get into this content because I'm super excited about the conversation that we have today. But first, we got to set some ground rules because I know that this is a tough conversation. It's a little bit unorthodox. It may even be controversial, but that's okay because we're gonna break some things down. And I am, of course, an attorney. I own Mobile General Counsel, so I'm very big on language. I'm very careful with my words. I try as hard as I can to be specific in the way that I talk about things. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page as it relates to what we're talking about here. Okay. Number one, fairness. The definition of fair, there are a variety of definitions of fairness, but for the purposes of this conversation, this is the definition of fairness that we're going to go with. Okay. We're not talking about equality. So equality is everyone gets the same thing, no matter their needs, right? That's equality. Fairness means that you're impartial or there's just treatment or behavior without favoritism or discrimination. So when I say fairness is un-American, we know that in this country, the justice system is not impartial. I'm a lawyer and I know that the justice system is not impartial. It would be naive for me to believe the justice system is impartial. Then we also know that every single person in this country, whether you're able-bodied or not, whether you're a woman or a man, whether you identify as something other than a woman or a man, whether you're non-conforming, whether you're heterosexual, you are not treated the same, right? Most reasonable people in this country can agree that every single person is not treated the same, right? So that is what I mean when I say fairness is un-American. Now, when something is un-American, because I just got to go there, right? Because I don't want people coming for me in my messages or sending me these nasty emails like, what does it mean? She's saying things are un-American. Oh my gosh, let me be very clear. Un-American means not in accordance with the American characteristics, right? These are the definitions that we're working with this morning. If you're getting this makes sense to you, just drop a make sense in the comments, okay? So when I say something is un-American, it means that it's not in line historically with the characteristics of America, but I'm going to prove it to you because lawyers, we're all about facts, right? We're all about making things plain and proving it to you. There was a study that was done by prisonpolicy.org. And I know it's early and some of you all have not had your coffee yet. And you're like, she's dropping these definitions and she's dropping these things down, but stay with me. I promise you I'm going somewhere. There was a study that was done that basically wanted to look at whether or not police killings in America were comparable to that of other established democracies, whether or not if you were to make up for the difference in population size, make up for some other inequalities that we see across the border in different countries, if we were to make up for all that, population size, etc., would police killings in U.S. still occur at such a higher rate, right? And what this study found was that when they looked at the number of police killed by, or the number of people killed by law enforcement per 10 million, in America, The data revealed that in the United States, that number looked like 33.5. In Canada, which was the second highest, it looked like 9.8. And the countries they compared were the US, Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Germany, England, Wales, Japan, Iceland, and Norway. Norway had like 0. And they looked at specifically, let me see here, because I'm seeing that there was an audio issue. Okay, can you hear me? Hopefully you're not getting so much feedback. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm seeing an audio issue. And for Sergio, when you're recording this or you're editing it, let me know. So if you all can hear me on Instagram, drop yes. If you can hear me on Facebook, put yes. And then Tiara, let me know if you can hear me on LinkedIn as well. In terms of and I'm going to keep going with this. In terms of the police killings and the inequities that were taking place there, they were able to see that in the US, that number looked like 33.5. In Canada, it looked like 9.8. Okay, great. We changed mics, so that's good. In Australia, that number looked like 8.5. So essentially in the US, there were over 1,000 killings, police killings of citizens. In Canada, there were 36. The next highest was 21. Okay, so when we're talking about fairness and inequity and whether or not it's un-American and what I'm basing this on, those are some of the things that I'm thinking about in making that declaration. I know it's a bold declaration, but we're going to go with it anyways. And so when I'm thinking through, okay, this country is not fair, right? But I still have to exist within it. And that doesn't mean, and I'm not saying that this country is bad, that I want to leave. I'm not saying any of that. What we're saying is, how do we operate? How do I, as a leader in my field, how do I help people operate at their highest level in a system that has historically been unfair? How do we make that happen? And here on this show, because it's all about being helpful, it's all about solutions, we're going to talk through that. And one of the things that I want you all to understand conceptually is that in order to thrive in an unfair system, you have to lean into your unfair advantage. Okay? So I'm going to repeat that. In order to thrive in an unfair system, you have to lean into what your unique unfair advantage is. And I'm going to help you think through what that thing is on this morning, on this Good Friday morning. Okay. So when we're thinking through fairness, equity, inclusion, all of these things, this is where this comes from for me. So my background, when I worked prior to starting Mobile General Counsel, my own firm, I worked at several large firms, and my job was to represent companies against employees in employment discrimination cases, right? Now, some of you are like, oh my gosh, you represented the employer. I did. That's what I did. So in doing that, what I was doing was counseling employers on how they were able to navigate different discriminatory issues that came up when they already got to the lawsuit phase. So at the point that they're coming to my firm, at that time, they'd already been sued. There was already an issue, and or they already thought they were going to be sued, and or they needed to terminate an employee for unjust behavior, right? We'll just leave it at that. Now, as a former management side employment lawyer, I have seen all manner of wild things in the workplace. You cannot surprise me. So when I'm going into these companies and they're asking for, hey, I want a diversity workshop one time, I'm like, that's not going to work. What I recommend to companies and to people is not like, let's do this one-off diversity workshop. It'd be better for corporations to retain me to actually counsel long-term, do executive coaching for their employees to teach them how to navigate an unjust system, more so than me coming in for an hour and doing a workshop. Whether or not they want to make the financial investment that requires, which is steep, is a whole nother story. But that's going to be your best bet if you want to see real change in your workplace. Anyways, back to how we can thrive in this unfair system. When you think through all the different ways big companies, billion-dollar brands become billion-dollar brands, typically it started with an unfair advantage or an unrecognized unfair advantage. And let's talk about Pepsi, right? That is one of the largest brands in the world. When it was started by a guy who dropped out of medical school, or maybe it was pharmacy school, right? He had to leave because something happened at home. And he went back home, started a corner store, and started making this, what we now know as Pepsi. The recipe may have changed. What we now know as Pepsi in the back of his shop. He was just making it, right? And what he believed was that it actually had some type of healing properties because of the materials that he was used. It was supposed to help with indigestion based on the things that he was mixing it with. what's so interesting to me just about that piece of the story, when I was reading it, what was interesting was he dropped out of school. But based on his background, he was able to make up a concoction that became what we now know as Pepsi. Now, because of the war, I think it was World War I, because of what happened, the company that inevitably became what we now know as Pepsi fell on hard financial times when it was owned by an individual owner. So in 1923, I believe it was, he sold that company and he sold it for $30,000. That's it. $30,000. Now that's in 1923. So I was curious because obviously I'm curious. And the lawyer in me was like, well, I have to do more research on this. What does $30,000 equate to today in 2020? Every inflation calculator that I looked up said that it equates to about $450,000 today. Well, then I'm like, okay, that may have seemed like a lot of money back then, but what does that mean? Yes, so many challenges, like so many of us. But what does that mean in terms of what does that mean in terms of like what is it worth now, right? What is Pepsi worth now? And so now when you look at the valuation of that company, we're talking about billions of dollars. We're talking just US valuations. We're talking about well over we're talking about billions of dollars of revenue that they're doing each and every year. So then I start thinking, well, man, I bet he couldn't even foresee how amazing that brand would have been in 1923, after the war, after he's dealing with all of the challenges, after he's dealing with economic challenges, mental challenges, like so many people are dealing with now. So I want to talk to for a moment the people who are dealing with challenges in 2020. Who isn't that, right? Like who isn't dealing with some level of challenge in 2020? Here's what I want to say to you. It is going to seem like when you're in the thick of it, there are things that you cannot overcome that are insurmountable to you because they seem so big, because the world is so wild, because everything is going so crazy. It seems like I'm totally out of control. And when your mind goes into this place of feeling out of control, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to overcome it, it is impossible for you to make good, rational, reasonable decisions without controlling your thoughts. So I've studied mindset quite a bit. When we look at my TEDx talk, the first one that I did was called The Currency of Confidence. It's all about the mindset, beliefs, and actions of successful people. Then my second talk was called The Love Method of Communication. For both of those talks, I had to study mindset and what science says about the way our brains work. What's so interesting about the way our minds work is that we instinctively, when we start having thoughts, negative thoughts like, oh my goodness, the world is ending. I don't know what's going on. I don't have the financial wherewithal to make it through. I don't know who's going to get elected next week. I don't know if my business will survive. I don't know if my kids are safe. I don't know if I should go to the grocery store. I don't know if it's safe. I don't even know if I can order from Amazon. All of those thoughts, when we start going into the what ifs, what can happen? How do we do things? How can we make things work? It becomes so difficult to make clear, rational decisions. And so you typically make decisions in the direction of your fear. Right. And we're going to bring all this back to your unfair advantage. But when you are making decisions from a place of fear, it becomes impossible to make really good, sound decisions. And I bring up the Pepsi story only to say that some of you may be in that moment. You may be in your Pepsi moment. You have created something out of a need in this moment. You've created this business out of the fact that you have a solution to problems that are out there in the marketplace, or you're creating a brand because there is a need for people to see you and for you to be visible for whatever reason in your particular industry. But in this moment in 2020, right, in the year of our Lord 2020, if you're not very, 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 very careful about the thoughts that you allow to permeate and flood your mind, you're going to make a decision that could impair your ability to have impact in the future. And because the entire point of this particular podcast, this particular video series is all about how do we build billion-dollar brands, whether the world knows it or not, and billion-dollar, taking away the fact of the financial, like whatever money is in your bank account, whatever money you're making from your brand right now, A billion-dollar brand is a brand that could impact billions of people. It could be a brand that has the propensity to impact billions of people, maybe not even now, but maybe not even in your lifetime, but in the lifetime of others. So don't get caught up on the figures. Don't get caught up on the number. Get caught up in the vision. And your vision has to extend far past a moment, okay? It has to extend far past a moment. Yeah, so someone says Pepsi moment. Yeah, so you may be, 2020 could very well be your Pepsi moment. It could be the moment where you're like, I'm about to let all this go for way less than it's worth because I can't see past my current circumstance and I have not asked for help from people who can. Because in moments when your vision is weak, in moments when you can't see past your vision, you're going to need to have other people in your corner, other counselors, right? You're going to need other counsel that can see past your vision, your temporary moment of doubt, right? That is why your circle is so important. Your friendships are so important. Coaching is so important. Adequate counsel is so important. Who you hire to do anything for your business, whether it be a lawyer, whether it be a consultant, is so critical to your company, because every single person that touches your company isn't just touching a thing, they're touching a vision. And if you start to look at it like that, then you're going to be even more cautious about who you allow to touch your vision. Company feels sterile, right? It feels very like, I could hire a lawyer. It doesn't matter if the lawyer is good or not. I don't care if I believe in their vision. I don't care if they have experience, whatever. I just need to get this done. No. You want to look at your business, and this is how big brands grow. They never buy when people are. This is just as an aside. One of the firms that I worked at did a lot of deals. That they always, we're doing deals all the time. There was a lot of transactions going on, a lot of transactional lawyers. When you look at these companies' valuations, the reason the valuation is so much higher than the actual revenue the company is making, and this is just. I'm just teaching you guys how the behind the scenes of how these deals are made. The reason why the valuation is so much higher is because oftentimes they're not only looking at the numbers, they're looking at the vision of the company. They're looking at the visionary. They're looking at the leader. A lot of venture capitalists that I have spoken to said that they invest in the person leading the company, even more so than they're investing in the technology or the assets behind the company. And in their experience, it's a better bet to invest in people than it is to just invest in the revenue numbers, which could potentially change. So you want to think through, is every single person who I'm allowing to do any type of business with my company, are they qualified, not just to do the work, not just to touch the company, not just to do the training that I'm hiring for? Are they qualified to touch the vision of this organization? Because that is exactly what they're doing. And it's important to take every single piece of your company as serious as possible, because you're building a brand that could impact billions, millions, trillions of people, whether in your lifetime or the next. And personally, we talked the other day about how I work with people who are building brands that last. So I don't work with people who have here today, gone tomorrow businesses or brands who don't have vision. We really work to qualify our clients to ensure we're working with people who have visions for their organization. So let's circle it back to your unfair advantage, because I know there are some people watching this or listening to this right now who are like, well, how do I identify my unfair advantage? How can I start to position my unfair advantage in a way that can get me through this? Okay, so I'm seeing the comments come through. Thank you guys so much. Yes. How? When everything's going wrong around me, how? One of the things we discussed in the last episode, and if you missed that, you can find it on my pages. One of the things that we discussed is this: your mind, your mindset, your thoughts have to be divorced from your bank account. Your mindset, your thoughts have to be divorced from your bank account. What do I mean by that? When you are building a big brand, when you are building a big vision, I can't make decisions now that are solely tied to the money that's in the bank today. I can't plan now only for the money that I have in the bank today. This is why large organizations, billion-dollar brands, are projecting. They have projections. They're planning 10 years ahead. They're not planning on a quarter-by-quarter basis. They may add some things in, but there is still a plan in place for the next decade of the organization, the next 5 years of the organizations. Those conversations are being had. And so sometimes we reduce our visions to only planning a year ahead. We reduce our visions to only planning next month. We reduce our visions to a very small social media calendar, or we reduce our visions to these very short periods of time. But the fact is, we need to be planning ahead, way ahead, 5 years ahead. But you need a 1-year plan, you need a 3-year plan, you need a 5-year plan, you need a decade plan. When do you want to sell this business? And why do you need all of that? Because once you write out that this company is even going to be around for the next 5, 10, or 15 years, then you start operating on a different level. You immediately start operating on a different level. When you have a 5-year plan, because let me tell you how I know it's true. When we first sat down last year to do our annual plan, that alone helped our revenue increase 200% in a pandemic. And I know, and the studies show this, when you write out a vision, you actually have, I don't know, if it's 50% more of a chance, I don't even want to give you all a wrong number, but you have a far higher probability of actually completing and doing the thing that you set out to do. So I know for a fact that writing it out, just that exercise, and then holding yourself accountable to that really does help. But more importantly, you want to tell yourself, you want to prove it to yourself that you have enough stick-to-itness to make a vision come to life long-term. So that is going to be something that you really, really want to do. Yes, they have to be qualified to touch the vision. So how do you identify your unfair advantage? Number one, your unfair advantage is not tied to your gender. It's not tied to your race. It's not tied, or it might be. Let me restate that. You are not disqualified from having an unfair advantage just because you weren't born a white heterosexual male. You aren't disqualified from it. And in fact, your unfair advantage may lie in the very thing that society has criticized you for your entire life. Your unfair advantage may lie in the very thing that makes you unsuitable for traditional corporate paths. Your unfair advantage may lie in the very thing that you've been hiding from the world because it somewhat embarrasses you still. The fact that you have a past may be your unfair advantage. The fact that you're a Black woman may be your unfair advantage. The fact that you're a diverse person in a corporate space where there's not a lot of you may be your unfair advantage. And so what you need to do is think about how do you wish you could show up if what other people said was not a consideration, and start figuring out a way to show up like that, because that's going to be your unfair advantage. That is where your unfair advantage lies. Let me tell you. And this is how this showed up for me in my own life. In undergrad and in high school, I did not have good grades. What I did have was an ability to orate. I've always been an orator. I've always spoken well. I've always done a lot of activities, and I've won awards in doing that. Instead of focusing, instead of hiding the fact that because it was a burden for me. When I was interviewing at these different companies, I would feel like, oh man, I can't, if they see my GPA, they're not going to hire me, even though I present well in the interview. What I started to do, because I had to get over it. In undergrad, didn't have good grades. Graduated with a 2.1 from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And in fact, a really popular publicist was like, well, make sure you don't tell anyone that, because it'll just mean that they won't have confidence in your ability to be an exceptional lawyer or an exceptional speaker or an exceptional coach or an exceptional consultant. And I was like, I'm going to disregard that. What I did instead, I had a 2.1 in undergrad. I went to law school and I decided that I was going to get all A's. Literally, it started with a decision. After deciding I was going to get all A's, I did the work and the research to figure out how to get all A's. So it starts with a decision, then you'd go into the research. But until I made the decision, I couldn't go into the research. So I go into law school. I end up getting all A's. Some of you have heard this story before, maybe not. Then I wrote a book called The Law School Hustle. And that book, on the cover of the book, the way that I promoted the book, every time I pitched the book to colleges, I always said, this book is about how I went from a 2.1 GPA to graduating Northwestern Law, one of the top law schools in the country, with a 3.86 GPA, by using study habits and tactics that I can teach any student. The unfair advantage in that wasn't that, the unfair advantage in that was the fact that I had a 2.1 GPA. The very thing that embarrassed me to tell companies in interviews, the very thing that I thought would disqualify me from success, would disqualify me from getting into law school, is the very thing that allowed me to position that book to go on to make over $50,000 in revenue plus from a book. right? That I wrote myself and self-published. And that's just a piece of the puzzle. So the fact that that book was able to do so well, the fact that that book has like over like so 5-star reviews on Amazon, several other emails, and let me tell you this, that book has helped over 14 law students who've told me go from tier 4 low-ranked law schools to one of the top 14 law schools in the nation. They just read the book, did the work in the book, and got those results just from reading my book. So the unfair advantage is that everyone, and then those 14 students that emailed me, told me they went to these great schools, did all these great things, transferred up and went to better law schools and did all that. Those students told me that prior to reading that book, they'd never gotten good grades. The only reason they even read the book was because I was honest about the fact that I had a 2.1 in undergrad. My unfair advantage in the academic success space was the fact that I wasn't academically successful in undergrad. So some of you are hiding your flaws, you're hiding your story, you're hiding behind it because you think it disqualifies you. Yeah, it may disqualify you to some people. There may be some people who think, oh, you're not qualified, you're not smart. How could you dare say that? But there are a lot more people who don't make it. Let me prove it to you. Northwestern is one of the top 10 law schools in the nation, maybe their top 14. There's 200 law schools. Where is there a bigger audience? Me targeting law students who go to the top 14 law schools, or me targeting everyone else who goes to one of the other 150 law schools? Sure, there's a lot of people who are in the top 5% of their class, but the fact that I was in the bottom 50% of their class means my market share was larger. There are some of you who are hiding your flaws when in fact the very thing that did not qualify you, the very thing that makes you it doesn't make you seem as elite, it doesn't make you seem as popular as everyone else, that's the very thing that will make you relate to more people, the masses. Because here's the thing, everybody fails. And most people are operating in mediocrity. The reason excellence is the standard, the reason people who do well, who are at the top, end up thriving and doing all of that, is because it's very few of them. It's not because there's a lot of them. So if you're someone who has overcome mediocrity to achieve excellence, you've overcome your flaws to achieve greatness, then that is the very thing that's going to give you your unfair advantage. And yes, I understand that it is harder when you are Black and brown in this country. And yes, that means that you may have to work harder. But what I would recommend is that you reframe that in your mind in a way that serves you so that you can still achieve and succeed despite the circumstances that you're put within. So I think, one of the things that I would recommend is that you really think through, what is my unfair advantage? What is the thing that embarrasses me? That's going to be the question that you're going to ask yourself. What is it about my past that embarrasses me? What is it about my first year in business that embarrasses me? What is it about my brand or lack thereof that embarrasses me? What are my traits that don't make me as appealing? What are those things? So that then you can pull that out, because I promise you that's going to be your unfair advantage. That's going to be your unfair advantage. That's going to be the thing that takes you from where you're at to where you want to go. It's going to be in talking about your truth and being 100% honest about who you are and who you've been. And the reason why visionary, like I talk about on this show, we talk about life, law, and business. On the legal side, a lot of business owners come to me, and when they're trying to hire a lawyer, they're thinking, okay, well, how much is it? That's the first thing they ask. The fact of the matter is, the first thing you need to figure out, and now with the internet and with people putting their information and all that stuff online, you can research people before even reaching out to them, and you can see whether or not you agree with their personality type, their values, and their vision. But you need to figure out, are people qualified to touch your vision? Do they have vision of their own? Because I can guarantee you, people who lack vision for themselves, personally and professionally, it's going to be very difficult for them to buy into your vision, or to not be intimidated by your big vision for yourself. So do not negate this moment in time. Don't avoid the fact, don't shy away from the fact that 2020 could be your Pepsi moment. It could be the moment that your business is faced with whether or not to continue investing, continue forging forward, continue doing the things that you know will be impactful and beneficial to your business, or it could be the time that you pull back out of fear and you sell your legacy for a fraction of the cost of what it's worth. And so you don't want to do that. You do not want to do that. You do not want to do that. And I'll tell you guys a little bit. The reason why fairness is the topic of this morning is because I saw a post in a Facebook group and they were talking about fairness. And she was like, well, this lawyer told me that one of the contract terms I'm thinking about putting in my contract isn't fair, right? Let's just leave it at that. And she was like, well, yeah, it isn't fair. And that instantly, as a former big law attorney, as a former attorney that represented billion-dollar brands, I'm like, fair. Here's the question. Is it legal? Is it compliant? Other than those questions, as an attorney, the way that you want your lawyer to think about your business is, how can we fiercely protect what you've built? If you've hired a lawyer and you don't get the sense that that lawyer is fiercely protecting what you've built in compliance with all laws, in compliance with all the things that they need to do, then you need to get you a new lawyer. You don't think they're fierce about protecting your vision? They should not be touching your vision. And most of the time, the inquiry is not fairness, it's compliance. Does it comply? Is it legal? Okay, great. We have to go with that. But then after that, we have to figure out how we can fiercely protect the vision that you have for this company. And we don't protect what you're building now. We protect what you're building for the future. So my goal as an attorney isn't just to protect my clients as they are built, like protect what they're building now, which may be in its infancy. It is to protect what they're building, not just what they have already in place. So you want to think through, and I say that only to say a lot of you, it's Q4, okay? Yeah, Q4. And a lot of us are trying to figure out, how are we going to spend into 2021? This is what I'm figuring out in my business. I met with my accountant. I'm figuring out, what am I investing in for 2021? What coaches am I going to hire? What employees are we going to hire? How are we investing our money? How are we moving things around? As you're making those determinations, and professional services is like professional development and things like that, coaching and all of that, you can write that stuff off, necessary to your business. When you're thinking about, how are you going to be, what should you be spending on to build in the future? Every single consideration has to be, is this person qualified to touch the vision? So I will leave you guys with that. That is the consideration. Is this person qualified to touch the vision? Because if not, then you got to let it go. You got to let it go, because it's your job to protect that vision and to hire people that are going to do the exact same. So hopefully this was helpful. If it was helpful, put helpful in the comments. I don't go live on LinkedIn as much. For those of you listening to this on a podcast form, I typically go live on my business Facebook page. So Ashley in Kirkwood, that Facebook page is where you can find me on Facebook, and then also Instagram at the Ashley Nicole Show. So if you all would like, you can definitely sign up for the holiday party that Mobile General Counsel is throwing this year. It's 100% free. Just go to AshleyNicoleKirkwood.com. Just go to AshleyNicoleKirkwood.com/holiday party and sign up for the holiday party. And I will see you guys there in December. We're giving out resilience awards because I have clients who have maintained their resilience through all of this to grow and expand their big brand, their billion-dollar brands, their big visions. And so we're going to celebrate that, because this has been a year. No matter where you are in the world. I have people who work for me literally all across the world, and it's been a year for us all, right? It's been a year for us all. And so we want to celebrate. We want to end this year on a really, really, really high inspirational note. It's going to be an amazing event. There'll be some networking, a panel. I'll be doing an entrepreneur's address, and we'll be giving out prizes. I'm very thrilled about what this will mean. And so I want you all to join me there. AshleyNicoleKirkwood.com/holiday party. And I will see you guys there. Thank you so much for joining. And let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this.